should have learned from America's recent experience of an onboard outbreak.
The group that is most sickened by this is not normally the age group of soldiers or Navy servicemen. So, it's not that dangerous per se, like in terms of life and death, but in terms of operational capability, yeah, it's a bad thing, because if a third of your crew is sick and not functional, then your ship is not functional. Well, you'd like to think that social distancing and things like that could work, but those things are not going to be possible on a close quarters ship of any type. I actually am surprised that the Navy doesn't seem to have reacted and learned from that type of situation, because we had that months ago and we could see how it was handled and also what the vulnerabilities were. Very much a bureaucratic response as opposed to real leadership. It seems a little too late.
Still ahead for you this hour, while America's death toll spirals, the New York Times has begun blaming Russia too, saying that Kremlin propaganda is making the pandemic worse. We'll have the details on that story, plus others too, just after the break.
Join me every Thursday on The Alex Salmond Show, when I'll be speaking to guests on the world of politics, sport, business, and show business. I'll see you then.
Welcome back to The Weekly. Now, the New York Times is accusing Russia's president of personally helping to spread COVID-19 in America. According to the paper, Kremlin propagandists have done that by discrediting the American healthcare system. Our senior correspondent, Murad Gazdiev, takes a closer look at the story.
Nowhere in the world is it as bad as in America. A quarter of the world's confirmed infected are in the States. The economy is on the brink of ruin, millions fighting unemployment. Someone has to take the blame, preferably someone foreign.
We want to look into it, World Health Organization, because they really are, they called it wrong. They missed the call.
Blame the World Health Organization, blame the Chinese, blame conspiracies, and of course, blame Russia.
A decade of health disinformation promoted by President Vladimir Putin of Russia has sown wide confusion, hurt major institutions, and encouraged the spread of deadly illnesses.
The New York Times lies right off the bat. There is no widespread confusion. In fact, Americans' trust in scientists and doctors has grown year after year, according to Pew Research. A record 9 in 10 Americans trust scientists and doctors, and less than half of Americans trust the media, or the New York Times, apparently for good reason.
Experts fear that it will foster public cynicism that erodes Washington's influence, as well as the core democratic value of relying on demonstrable facts as a basis for decision-making.
The facts were as follows. In January, it was the New York Times that misled and misinformed potentially millions of Americans about the pandemic, telling them it's nothing to worry about and that the flu kills more people, reaching audiences far greater than any Russian bot network.
Given the checkered history of quarantines, Throughout history, they have been used to persecute the marginalized. Lawmakers and the media should rigorously examine the bases for any such restrictions.
It seems Trump followed the advice he read in the New York Times, delaying almost every measure against the virus, from mass quarantine to international travel restrictions to the last moment. Advice that has potentially contributed to the deaths of thousands of Americans. Sure, they apologized and admitted to being wrong, but it was too late.
Mr. Putin has worked hard to encourage Americans to see vaccinations as dangerous and federal health officials as malevolent.
And here we thought it was a matter of public knowledge that the United States is the capital of the world's anti-vaccine movement. A movement that was birthed not by Putin or the KGB, but by a British physician who erroneously linked vaccines to autism.
The alleged autism vaccine connection is perhaps the most damaging medical hoax of the last 100 years.
Even today, masses in the United States refuse vaccinations because a hoax in 1998 snowballed. The reason it snowballed is because the media gave a controversial research paper airtime, including the New York Times, which gave a platform for conspiracy theorist anti-vaxxers to speak, despite the overwhelming majority of the scientific community insisting it was nonsense. It is absurd to accuse the NYT of helping birth the anti-vaccine movement 20 years ago, but for some reason it's okay for the New York Times to accuse others of spreading similar disinformation.
The Russian president has waged his long campaign by means of open media, secretive trolls and shadowy blogs that regularly cast American health officials as patronizing frauds.
Putin didn't put a trash bag on that nurse. When Americans see their nurses dressed in trash bags, they lose faith in their system, in their leadership, because their leaders have failed them, not because Putin said so.
Everybody in healthcare, if we are essential, we deserve masks. We deserve the right protection to be in that environment that is completely exposed with COVID-19.
Or look at all the charlatans, the bloggers, the televangelists, who are being watched by millions of Americans. Is that Putin too? Is he behind America's faith-based medicine?
COVID-19! COVID-19! I blow the wind of God! The wind of God! On you. On you.
Was it Putin or American politicians who cut funding for counter-pandemic programs? Was it Russian bots who urged America's elderly to sacrifice themselves so the economy could keep running?
I think all of my fellow grandparents out there are going to be smart. We all want to live. We want to live with our grandchildren as long as we can. But the point is, our biggest gift we give to our country and our children and our grandchildren is the legacy of our country.
We can go on and on about how American media and politicians bungled this pandemic, caused untold suffering, but we won't. Instead, we'll end with this, a quote from the New York Times itself.
It is worth remembering that disease, or the fear of disease, can bring out the worst in humanity. Pandemics often fit scapegoating. Jews were widely blamed for the Black Death, creating a fertile field for demagogues.
The only difference this time, it's Putin.
Now, the pandemic has brought entire economies to a virtual standstill, but with factories closed, roads empty and planes grounded, there has also been a sharp drop in pollution levels. In many parts of the world, the contrast is striking. here on RT. We're back with more news for you in about half an hour from now. So do stay at home, stay safe and stay with us.
Max Kaiser's Financial Survival Guide. You know, they say money doesn't grow on trees. Oh look, quantitative easing. This is how central banks support dying economies. I'm gonna call them right now and say, stop the madness, stop the madness!
The world is driven by dreamers, shaped by thinkers and those with vision.
Who dares, thinks. We dare to ask.
Il n'y a pas seulement les Français, les chrétiens du monde entier veulent la vérité.
Notre-Dame a résisté à 850 ans, pourquoi y aurait-il le feu?
L'incendie de Notre-Dame est comme un signe, comme un avertissement d'une situation dramatique de tout l'ensemble du catholicisme en France et de la société française.
Tout le monde dit tout, vous entendez tout. Il y en a qui disent c'est mégot, il y en a qui disent c'est attentat, il y en a qui disent c'est les gilets jaunes, il y en a qui... Vous entendez de tout.
Oui, c'est ça, c'est qu'on entend tellement de versions, on entend tellement de suppositions.
Tout a été fait pour faire croire que c'était un accident. Et comme tous les Français, j'ai trouvé cette précipitation et cette thèse peu vraies.
Ce jour-là, je devais travailler, mais j'ai pas travaillé avant la Semaine Sainte. Et ça faisait trop. Et il fallait que je choisisse un jour de coupure.
Et ça a été ce jour-là.
Mesdames et messieurs,
lorsque l'alarme a retenti dans Notre-Dame, c'était donc en plein pendant une célébration.
Et on nous dit une première fois, il faut sortir, il y a le feu.
Il n'y a pas d'entraînement dans la cathédrale, c'est-à-dire des moments où l'on déclenche une alarme. J'ai simplement pensé qu'il s'agissait d'un dysfonctionnement du signal d'alarme.
Quelqu'un qui laisse un colis, tout le monde est sorti tranquillement, en se disant on va rentrer dans 10 minutes. 20 minutes plus tard, on nous dit vous pouvez rentrer.
Et à ce moment-là, le prêtre m'a dit qu'il allait terminer de célébrer la messe, c'est-à-dire sans musique. Il m'a dit simplement que je pouvais rentrer chez moi, et ce que j'ai donc fait. Et il était environ 18h45.
Et puis, la messe continue. Et au moment de la consécration, à ce moment-là, on nous dit il faut vraiment sortir. Il y a des flammes de 10 mètres sur le toit. Et nous, dedans, il n'y avait rien. Nous n'entendions rien, nous ne voyions rien, nous ne sentions rien.
Quelques minutes après, un collègue organiste donc m'a téléphoné en me demandant donc si j'étais au courant de ce qui se passait. Et tout en lui parlant au téléphone, depuis la fenêtre chez moi, j'ai aperçu un énorme nuage de fumée.
On voit les images, mais on se dit que c'est pas réel.
Toute l'histoire de Notre-Dame de Paris qui part en fumée, c'est pas possible. La charpente, je suis habitué à la visiter. On y va souvent, nous les surveillants, le contrôle des choses. Quand je montais dans la charpente, je touchais la charpente comme ça, je touchais le bois. On ressentait une émotion, on ressentait une histoire.
Aux environs, et là, au moment où j'arrive à quelques centaines de mètres, j'aperçois la toiture qui est complètement sous les flammes.
Et puis, à un moment, le vent tourne. La flèche vrille et j'entends le crac. C'était vraiment être au chevet de quelqu'un qui meurt. Et je me dis, oui, tout va être ravagé. Tout va être ravagé.
Franchement, j'ai eu l'apocalypse.
Le lendemain, très tôt le matin, j'ai été me promener sur les quais de la Seine et j'ai vu beaucoup de Parisiens. J'ai vu rencontrer notamment un tailleur de pierre de Notre-Dame qui avait travaillé pendant 50 ans sur cette cathédrale et qui m'a dit « Monsieur, vous avez la parole, posez la question de savoir ce que c'est parce que je ne vois pas comment ça a pu brûler comme ça. » Et c'est à ce moment-là que j'ai vu une dépêche AFP aussi où le procureur de la République disait quelque chose d'étonnant. Il disait d'abord que l'enquête sera longue et dans la même phrase, il disait nous sommes certains que ce n'est qu'un accident. Et là, ça m'a interpellé.
Even though it'd been a year since the historic cathedral caught fire, French investigators have yet to make significant progress and still haven't established the exact cause of the blaze. There are two main theories, an electrical fault and a discarded cigarette butt, but even that's far from certain.
Là où j'ai fait ma déclaration qui a fait scandale, qui n'était qu'une question, j'ai dit « Je veux savoir si c'est un accident, un acte de malveillance ou un acte. » Et suite à cette prise de parole, toutes les autorités politiques se sont déchaînées contre moi, les journalistes, en disant que j'étais un complotiste, que c'était une honte, ce que je venais de dire. Et cette réaction insupportable des autorités m'a fait dire que j'avais mis le doigt sur un problème réel.
Many questions have been asked about the investigation since it began. The cigarette butt theory, for example, is largely based on statements from a contractor admitting that its workers did sometimes violate the rules and smoke on the cathedral roof. That same company, though, insists that even when builders did smoke, it was in the scaffolding outside the cathedral itself, not inside where the fire is thought to have started, and no cigarette butts that could have set Notre Dame on fire were ever found, nor any electrical appliance that might have short-circuited. A year on, and the investigators still have a surfeit of guesses and a shortage of evidence, all fueling rumor and suspicion that the authorities are not telling the whole truth. One theory suggesting that Notre Dame had been set on fire was fueled by the site's special status. The cathedral is in the heart of Paris, on the Ile de la Cité, one of the most expensive places to live in the center of France's capital. It's also a tourist magnet, which some enterprising traders might say makes it a gold mine.
L'île de la Cité a toujours eu un problème, c'est-à-dire qu'en fait, c'est une île où il y a très peu de vie en dehors de la vie touristique. Et voilà, et une fois que la cathédrale, qui était un peu le moteur, le poumon de cette île, s'est arrêtée le 15 avril au soir dernier, il n'y a eu plus de vie économique en fait sur cette île. Donc il faut trouver un nouveau dynamisme. Il n'y a pas de lieu d'accueil pour touristes, il n'y a pas de toilettes, il n'y a pas d'endroit pour poser ses bagages. C'est quand même dommage si on ne fait rien pour accueillir au mieux ces millions et millions de personnes qui viennent du monde entier pour voir Notre-Dame et Paris.
It later turned out that there was already a development plan for the Ile de la Cité. In 2016, when President Hollande was still in power, a project was introduced that was estimated at several billion euros. It involved new commercial buildings for tourism, but there was just one hitch. Notre Dame and the island on which it stands were protected by UNESCO, and there's no way to reconstruct it.
C'est le combat politique que je mène avec beaucoup d'autres pour que la flèche de Notre-Dame soit reconstruite à l'identique. C'est un combat pour la vérité historique, c'est un combat pour le respect des règles de l'UNESCO, c'est un combat contre un caprice d'un président immature.
There is no proof that Notre Dame was deliberately set on fire or that there is any connection with the Ile de la Cité development plans. For the time being, these are mere speculation. But more people started taking them seriously after the French government accepted the so-called exception law, permitting the authorities to rebuild the cathedral with almost no regard for urban development regulations, allegedly to complete the restoration as soon as possible.
Puisque j'ai voté contre à l'Assemblée nationale et j'ai combattu cette loi. Pourquoi ? Parce que s'il était normal d'accélérer la reconstruction et d'améliorer la coordination des troupes pour reconstruire Notre-Dame, je ne vois pas au nom de quoi on devait écarter les architectes des monuments.
But the half-hearted protestations of individual politicians and architects are easily dismissed.
On parle de Notre-Dame, finalement, on ne parle de la flèche. Quelle flèche allez-vous faire? Allez-vous la reconstruire à l'identique, etc. Toutes ces questions trouveront leur réponse sagement, grâce à nos débats nourris et déjà amorcés, le mouvement venu. Quant à l'architecte en chef des monuments que j'ai cité, je lui ai déjà expliqué plusieurs fois, et je le ferai de manière plus longue, qu'il ferme sa gueule et que nous avançons en sagesse pour que nous puissions sereinement faire le meilleur choix pour Notre-Dame, pour Paris, pour le monde.
Quand la cathédrale a brûlé, ensuite, dans les jours qui ont suivi, il y a eu une première image qui est arrivée. Puis alors après, il y en a eu plein. Ce sont des propositions spontanées de certains architectes qui ont donné libre cours à leur imagination et ont fait des propositions. J'ai vu des projets où on voyait une espèce de piscine sur le sommet du toit de Notre-Dame. C'est simplement impossible parce qu'une piscine, c'est de l'eau, ça pèse très très lourd. Et évidemment, la cathédrale ne supporterait pas ce poids-là. J'ai vu aussi une espèce de piste de skateboard. Ça n'a aucun sens. J'ai vu aussi des forêts pousser sur le sommet de la cathédrale. Je sais pas où les racines des arbres vont aller se planter. Enfin, on ne peut pas faire un toit en verre sur Notre-Dame parce qu'on ne saura pas entretenir le toit. Pour l'instant, il n'y a pas eu d'appel d'offres sur la reconstruction de Notre-Dame de Paris.
Alors, nous sommes dans ce qu'on appelle une phase impérieuse. C'est-à-dire c'est une phase d'urgence. On est là pour sauver le bâtiment pour l'instant. Il menace encore de s'écrouler. La cathédrale a été construite pour accueillir une charpente en bois et une toiture. Il faut un certain poids. Partez du principe que vous êtes une cathédrale. On vous appuie sur la tête. Vous arrivez à tenir comme ça, sans aucun problème, pendant 850 ans. Vous enlevez la main, naturellement, vous allez monter en fait. Donc il faut un certain poids. Il ne faut pas que ce soit trop lourd pour ne pas écraser la structure. Il ne faut pas que ce soit trop léger pour ne pas monter justement. Nous sommes en train de mettre des cintres, ce sont des structures en bois sous les arcs-boutants. Des planchers sont en train d'être posés au-dessus en fait de la cathédrale pour remplacer un peu le poids de la charpente, parce que le principe c'est d'appuyer en permanence sur le monument. Et ce qui est aussi urgent, c'est de démonter en fait l'échafaudage qui était en place pour la restauration de la flèche de la cathédrale. Voilà, et en le démontant, il faut faire attention parce qu'il maintient, on se demande s'il ne maintient pas aussi la cathédrale debout. Et tant que l'échafaudage ne sera pas démonté, on ne pourra pas commencer ces travaux.
Alors moi j'ai commencé à Notre-Dame, en fin de compte c'était un travail d'été, c'est-à-dire un travail étudiant. Et il y avait une place à l'accueil de la cathédrale. Après, on m'a proposé de venir travailler dans les bureaux parce que j'avais fait quand même des études qui me permettaient aussi de faire du secrétariat.
Je me rappellerai quand j'étais venue, tu avais 18 ans. Je l'avais accompagnée à la cathédrale avec 18 ans, toute petite.
Et puis le jour où il y a eu donc un poste qui s'est libéré, il a postulé parce qu'il s'est dit ce serait bien de travailler là aussi. En plus, on était ensemble du coup.
On était proches des touristes. On participait aux organisations des offices. Mais notre boulot avant tout c'était surveillant.
Of getting a cute puppy.
Once we got him, he was shaking a lot because he didn't know what to do.
He was trapped in this tiny little wire cage.
If we go near the crate with him, he will just start freaking out, and he won't let us bring him anywhere near it.
Thousands of breeding dogs are caged in inhumane conditions on puppy farms.
I mean, 6-7 years, they've been locked up in a cage outside. You see no protection from the weather, the heat, the cold air, the rain, the snow, the thunder, nothing. They have no protection.
Look at you. Look, it's okay.
Across the US, cruel puppy mills are supported by dog shows and pet stores.
Most of the puppies that are coming from these large-scale factory farming kind of operations are being sold in pet stores.
Even giant agribusinesses are involved, like Cargill and Monsanto.
There has been a shocking amount of organized opposition to efforts to increase the standards of care for dogs bred in commercial breeding facilities. Most of that opposition is coming from huge agricultural groups and industries that have nothing to do with dogs.
Dog by Dog on RTE.
J'arrive pas à y croire.
Ça fait longtemps que j'étais pas revenue.
Je suis triste.
Moi, j'avais cet attachement pour Notre-Dame qui était quand même assez important. Et le fait que mon mari vienne travailler aussi à Notre-Dame, il a compris cet attachement.
Donc c'est une histoire de famille.
Voilà,
c'est une histoire de famille, puis ça a amené mon épouse, moi-même, puis jusqu'à ce jour.
Et du Saint-Esprit. Amen. Alléluia.
Je suis né à Paris et en naissant à Paris, on a habité dans un quartier qui était juste à côté de Notre-Dame. J'ai toujours eu l'impression que l'île de la Cité était un grand vaisseau, un grand bateau, avec au milieu le poste de commandement qui était Notre-Dame de Paris et puis ces deux tours qui étaient comme deux phares qui éclairent devant. C'était la joie de devenir prêtre dans Notre-Dame de Paris et ensuite de dire ma première messe.
Et l'instrument qui se situe juste au-dessus de nous est le premier instrument que j'ai entendu étant très jeune. Et donc, je suis tombé amoureux de cet instrument et j'ai décidé moi-même d'en jouer. Le grand orgue de Notre-Dame, je crois que l'on peut dire que c'est l'orgue le plus célèbre au monde. Ça fait au total maintenant 15 années que je suis organiste de chœur à Notre-Dame. Et d'ailleurs, nous recevons très régulièrement des organistes du monde entier qui font parfois le déplacement juste pour poser leurs doigts sur cet instrument.
Quand il y a eu l'incendie à Notre-Dame, toute la famille a été marquée parce que nos enfants aussi. Pour eux, Notre-Dame, c'est une 6e personne dans notre famille.
Quand j'ai appris ta maladie, j'étais profondément touché.
Comme la plupart des femmes, j'ai découvert la maladie parce que j'avais une grosseur.
Et le matin, j'arrivais à la cathédrale et je me mettais au niveau de la porte Saint-Étienne, au niveau de la Vierge du Pilier. Et je passais mon temps à méditer, à me dire j'espère que tu vas guérir. Tous les matins, j'allumais une bougie. Tous les matins, j'étais à ses pieds.
Notre-Dame nous a entendus, la Vierge nous a entendus. Et que c'est grâce à elle qu'il arrive des belles choses à chacun, en fin de compte. C'est pas possible qu'elle ait traversé autant de temps et que, en une nuit, elle soit presque détruite.
J'ai vécu pendant 4 mois et demi à côté d'elle, comme ça, comme un squelette. J'ai vu qu'on avait retiré les vitraux, on l'a désossé, on a retiré les charpentes, on a retiré les pierres. J'ai vu toutes ces choses qui étaient comptées, numérotées et tout ça. C'est comme si on était en train de de faire une autopsie pour savoir qui avait mis le feu, comment c'était parti.
On April the 15th, 2019, social networks were ablaze, along with Notre Dame. Rumors and even fake messages began to spread like wildfire. One suggested that Islamic terrorists were behind the tragedy. There was never any official confirmation of the theory, but it did serve to arouse nationalist passions, partly because, at the time, France had endured a prolonged series of very real attacks on Christian shrines.
Très peu de temps avant ou après, la grande église de Saint-Sulpice à Paris a fait l'objet d'un attentat devant la porte, d'un incendie. On en a parlé. Donc il est évident que l'incendie de Notre-Dame s'est déroulé dans un contexte anti-chrétien.
Qui est défendu par l'extrême droite en France. Le parti des racistes veut absolument qu'il y ait un clash, une rupture entre le christianisme et l'islam. Ils refusent l'idée qu'on puisse vivre ensemble. Tout ce qui pourra alimenter leur idée, tout ce qui pourra faire croire à ce que les musulmans sont en France et en Europe pour causer le malheur du continent, eh bien ils s'en serviront pour élaborer des thèses, des rumeurs comme celle-là. Évidemment, il y a eu des attentats commis par des musulmans. Mais ça, tout le monde le sait, puisque ces mêmes terroristes, qui se prétendaient dire cela au nom de l'islam, ne s'en sont pas cachés. Mais là, il n'y a strictement aucune preuve.
Il n'y a pas simplement que Notre-Dame qui a connu cet incendie, il n'y a pas de réaction officielle, ou pratiquement pas.
D'abord en France, on n'a pas le droit dans les médias de parler des profanations d'églises. Il y a eu plus de 1000 actes antichrétiens, c'est-à-dire 3 par jour dans notre pays, et on n'en parle jamais. Si vous avez un acte contre une mosquée ou contre une synagogue, on en parle et c'est normal.
These pictures, which immediately saturated the internet, added fuel to the social media fire. It turned out that a few days before the blaze, statues of Christian saints had been removed from the roof of Notre Dame for restoration and were beheaded at the same time. A rational explanation did emerge later, but only after conspiracy theory supporters had accused the French authorities of yet another attack on Christian values.
Les statues des apôtres de Notre-Dame n'ont jamais été restaurées jusqu'à présent. Ces statues sont essentiellement en cuivre pour la peau et pour la structure intérieure en acier. Donc tant que la statue est étanche, il n'y a pas de corrosion. Mais dès qu'il y a un problème de pénétration d'eau, ça commence à se détériorer. La raison la plus importante de la restauration de cette œuvre, c'est la structure interne qui est en acier et qui est usée, rouillée. On a déboulonné les pièces qui tenaient la statue. Puis, on a dessoudé les têtes pour enlever les têtes, ce qui a permis de passer notre système de levage, une sangle, à l'intérieur de la statue pour pouvoir les lever en prenant l'armature dans les sangles pour pouvoir lever les pièces et les descendre avec une grue à plus de 50 mètres de haut et les descendre dans un camion pour les amener ici. Ces statues-là ont une peau très fragile. On le voit ici, vous voyez, la souplesse. Donc, si on avait serré les statues comme ça, on les aurait écrasées. C'est pour ça qu'on est passé par l'intérieur pour les soulever et il a fallu démonter la tête pour pouvoir vraiment prendre à des endroits qui sont résistants, avec la couleur d'origine qui est ce marron. La chance que nous avons eue, c'est de déposer ces statues 4 jours avant ce terrible incendie.
J'ai contemplé avec les larmes aux yeux la cathédrale consumée par le feu. 800 années de gloire et de beauté en un instant s'évanouir en fumée. Oh Notre-Dame, souvent sous les flammes, et regrettons nos fautes et nos offenses.
Nous avons été profondément meurtris, comme je pense tous les Français pratiquement, par cet incendie qui a ravagé le plus beau monument de Paris. Nous avons été vraiment déchirés. Et ensuite, Nous avons aussi été très ulcérés par un chant qui était relayé sur les ondes des médias françaises et un chant qui se moquait de l'incendie de Notre-Dame, qui se voulait humoristique. Liberté d'expression qui fait qu'on a le droit de blasphémer en France. On nous dit que la liberté d'expression, elle fait qu'on peut aussi se moquer des autres religions. Mais dans la réalité, si on s'en prend au judaïsme ou si on s'en prend à l'islam, il y a une levée de bouclier qui fait que tout de suite ça s'arrête. Tandis que lorsqu'il s'agit du christianisme en France, on peut y aller, on peut déverser des torrents de boue et donc il n'y a pas, ou pratiquement pas, de réaction gouvernementale.
Je suis né au Maroc. Je suis venu à l'âge de 3 ans à peu près. Et j'ai fait toute ma vie en France. J'ai pas de frontières. Je rentre dans une synagogue, je rentre dans une cathédrale, je rentre dans une mosquée, je rentre partout. Oui, c'est ce qui est bien, la cathédrale. On n'avait pas fait de différence des religions des uns et des autres. La porte était ouverte à tout le monde.
C'est donc vraiment l'église nationale, si je puis dire, une richesse pour tous les amateurs d'art, quels qu'ils soient. Je pense à la sculpture, à l'architecture, à la peinture, à la musique.
Aujourd'hui, quand je vais dedans alors qu'elle est vide, je suis extrêmement malheureux. Il n'y a plus rien, c'est un squelette. Du jour au lendemain, le lieu où j'allais prier, donc ma stabilité. Le lieu où j'allais dire la messe, donc ma vie. Le lieu où je faisais mon travail. Recevoir, accueillir, parler, confesser dans toutes les langues, etc. Fini. Fini.
Ça nous a touchés vraiment au plus profond de nous-mêmes parce que c'était notre cathédrale. Donc après les causes réellement, est-ce que, comme disait mon mari, seul le Seigneur le sait.
Les Friends of Notre-Dame de Paris a été créé en fait avant l'incendie parce que la cathédrale était déjà dans un très mauvais état. Alors évidemment, le travail à faire maintenant est encore plus gigantesque dans ce qui est collecté effectivement aujourd'hui, sans compter évidemment les promesses de dons, etc. C'est probablement de l'ordre de 10% de ce qui sera nécessaire. La phase de sécurisation de la cathédrale, cette première phase coûte déjà de l'ordre de 100 millions.
Volonté du Premier ministre d'avoir lancé ce concours d'architectes. Peut-être qu'il sélectionnera un nouveau projet, peut-être qu'il choisira de restaurer la flèche à l'identique. Je pense que le dernier mot viendra de toute façon au président de la République. Moi, ce que je peux vous dire pour avoir étudié le bâtiment de très près, c'est que c'est vrai que ce bâtiment était en mauvais état. Donc si on avait voulu que ce bâtiment disparaisse, on aurait attendu quelques années. On aurait refusé ce mécénat que nous avons porté. Et voilà, et le bâtiment aurait disparu naturellement. Donc c'est pour ça que moi, personnellement, je ne crois pas en la théorie que ce serait une personne mal intentionnée pour des raisons commerciales ou autres qui ait détruit ça. Moi, je pense que c'est un accident, comme il en arrive tous les jours.
Government silence is to rumor and speculation what oxygen is to fire. A year after the inferno of Notre Dame, the investigation is still faced with a plethora of burning questions.
On est aujourd'hui, je n'écarte aucune version. Nous sommes au point mort. Je suis impartial. Je demande, comme député de la nation, président d'un parti politique, une enquête qui dise la vérité. C'est tout.
Donc il y a vraiment une opposition forte qui existe entre les projets gouvernementaux et puis ce que veut le peuple catholique français qui veut la reconstruction à l'identique. la reconstruction pour que la cathédrale reste la cathédrale.
Humanity is on the edge of a precipice, thanks to continuing destruction of the natural world.
Это единственная, наверное, организация крупная в России, которая занимается охраной редких видов.
Этот проект – это в первую очередь восстановление генофонда.
Это не просто хищник, это индикатор вот того состояния природы, в котором мы живем.
Что же мы делаем? Мы землю нашу уничтожаем, глубокие шрамы оставляем, считаем себя хозяевами земли.
Human activity has brought us to the brink of the world's 6th major extinction event. And the people in this film just can't take it anymore.
Join me every Thursday on The Alex Salmond Show, when I'll be speaking to guests on the world of politics, sport, business, and show business. I'll see you then.
The stories that shaped the week here on RT. Moscow rolls out automated ID checks to allow essential travel during the lockdown. That after an initial pass system suffered big problems on the city's metro and roads.
Can I curse or not? This doesn't make sense.
What do you want? PPE! What do you want now?
Also to come, frontline medics in the US say their lives are being put at risk by the government's failure to supply hospitals with protective gear. And French teachers and doctors criticise President Macron's plan to reopen schools by mid-May, calling it premature and dangerous. Hello there, welcome. The latest developments and a look back at what's been happening over the last 7 days too. You're watching the weekly here on RT International. Well, let's start then with the latest numbers on the pandemic. More than 2.3 million cases have been confirmed across the globe. At least 161,000 people have died, with the highest death toll in the United States. And so far, more than 606,000 people have recovered from the virus. Now, today, Orthodox Christians around the world are celebrating Easter Sunday, but for most, going to church is not an option due to the pandemic. So in Russia, services are being streamed on the internet. Well, the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, has urged people to stay at home and pray. He led an overnight vigil at the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour in Moscow, attended by a small group of clergy. Traditionally, thousands do gather to light candles from the holy fire flown in from Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Russian Orthodox Church has given some recommendations on how to bless the traditional Easter cake at home. And President Vladimir Putin has sent out this Easter message.
These Easter celebrations are happening at a time of restrictions. They are necessary to battle the disease known around the world. We are closely analysing the experience of other countries to understand the situation, see the risks, and assess what to do in any scenario. We will do all that is necessary to stop the pandemic. There is no doubt that Russia will make it through these challenges with dignity. Happy Easter. Stay happy and healthy.
Well, in Russia, 361 people have lost their lives to the coronavirus, and there are almost 43,000 infections. The majority of those are here in Moscow. And this week, the city did roll out a digital pass scheme to ensure that people only use transport for essential purposes. After some early setbacks, the system is now fully automated. Saskia Taylor reports.
This week saw a few changes in the way Russia is fighting with the coronavirus outbreak. On Wednesday, a new pass system was rolled out right here in Moscow, radically limiting people's movement around the city. And that's going to remain in force until at least the 1st of May. Now, I can show you this one here is mine. It's got my name, it's got my passport data, it's also got my employer's information, and the most important thing, the personal code right at the very top. And I need this to get to work, to travel on a taxi, even pretty much to go anywhere other than to throw out the rubbish, walk the dog, go to my supermarket or my local pharmacy. But there were a few teething problems at the beginning. The site you register on crashed because of high demand, and on the first day that they came into force, they appeared to do more harm than good. It's not surprising then that initially the reaction to the pass system was a bit mixed.
Can I curse or not? This doesn't make sense. Everyone is a know-it-all. They say as usual, do it right now, and everyone started applying for passes, and the server crashed. It's idiotic. These can apply for it, those cannot, so it's not a quarantine at all.
These are the right measures and should be strictly implemented, but they must remain reasonable.
So the problem that we saw there was that each and every permit was physically being checked by the authorities, obviously creating crowds. But from next Wednesday, the system will become fully automated. You'll have to link up your Metro card to your travel permit online. And if you haven't done that, the barriers in the Metro just won't open and you won't be allowed through. Much more efficient. Now, a similar, far more streamlined system has also been created for cars. We heard stories here of people waiting for hours to get their documents checked, but now cameras will be scanning to see which vehicles have the right permits and which don't. Now, another big announcement this week was the postponing of the 9th of May. That is the annual Victory Day parade. Along with New Year, it is possibly the most highly anticipated event in the Russian calendar. So a bitter disappointment, especially as this year was going to be an extra special event as it marks 75 years since the defeat of fascism. But a large gathering of people, especially World War II veterans who are in the at-risk category, was something the Russian president said was simply not justified at this point.
I ordered to change the schedule and postpone the rehearsal for the military march on Red Square and postpone all other mass gatherings to celebrate 75 years since the Great Victory.
We have been promised the event will be held in 2020, just at a later date, either in the summer or even early autumn. So those are just some of the key decisions that were made in Russia this week. We're seeing how authorities are dealing with COVID-19 in various ways. They're trying to keep the country safe so that we can all return to normality as quickly as possible.
Asker Taylor there. Well, pharmaceutical firms worldwide are working flat out at the moment to develop vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. And in Russia, patients who have recovered are helping doctors by donating their blood plasma with antibodies for transfusions. One of the first donors talked to us and talked us through how it works.
I became a donor 2 weeks after I was discharged from hospital. As far as I know, there was the time when the concentration of antibodies in my blood had reached its peak. I received a call from the hospital, and they asked if they could pass my personal data to another medical institution. Then a team of medics from Sklifosovsky Institute came to take my blood for testing. 4 days after, I learned the results were good enough to be a donor. The procedure itself is rather simple and takes about an hour. During this time, you're surrounded by medics who are monitoring your condition. It's not scary, it's fast and causes no pain or losing sleeping consciousness. Anyone who came through this COVID infection could do the same. It was said my plasma might help 2 or 3 people who are about to be put on ventilators. You'd better put on a medical mask yourself than see people wearing masks and hazmat suits around you for a month. You shouldn't think this won't happen to you. I thought I was immune to this disease because I hadn't been ill for 13 years. But it happened anyway. It's better to stay at home for a month or 2 than stay in a grave forever.
Elsewhere, the United States has registered more than 39,000 deaths from COVID-19. According to official data, at least 27 doctors and nurses have died from the virus, but the media has been reporting much higher figures. Some medics have taken to the streets, blaming the government for the severe shortage of protective equipment.
No more deaths! No more deaths! What do you want? PPE! What do you want now?
This rally took place outside a hospital in New York, which has been devastated by the pandemic. Medics carried signs here demanding urgent action to supplies of PPE, personal protective equipment, where it's needed. The state's death toll now stands at more than 17,000. Emotions boiled over too at the protest, with nurses saying they are risking their lives due to government incompetence.
So we're standing here today to say enough is enough. Give us what we need to continue to fight this coronavirus pandemic. If you do not give it to us, more of our co-workers will die. And when they die, the chain is broken.
Let's think about the fact that the Mount Sinai bosses right now are in their mansions in Florida while their nurses are dying because they can't get the proper PPE. And they just don't give a damn. They don't care about our lives. They loaded the gun, they played Russian roulette with working people's lives, and we're paying the consequences.
Well, aside from the lack of protective gear, medics in the US say that the health insurance system too is putting people's lives at risk. A post by a nurse was widely shared on Facebook. Derek Smith recalled the final words he heard from a patient who was put on a ventilator. They were, "Who's going to pay for it?" The nurse spoke with RT.
It was really sad because someone who's, potentially going to die, I think the last thing they should be worried about is how to pay for their health care. It speaks to a misallocation of funds. We have almost endless discretionary spending for militarism. We recently just, injected $1.5 trillion into the stock market to address the failures of that. But when it comes to healthcare, the constant question is who's going to pay for it, which is the same question as the patient, ironically, but it just shows where the priorities are. Well, I don't know that it's necessary to have a multi-trillion-dollar annual military budget, with our alleged Department of Defense, where I think a real honest effort to defend would be with providing care for our citizens, especially with the amount of people that just lost their insurance that's tied to their employment. As we know, a lot of people have just lost their jobs with this pandemic. So.
Now, France does have one of the world's strictest lockdowns at the moment, with hefty fines for people who break the rules. And speaking earlier in the week, the president did say that the measures will have to be extended until May the 11th. So far, 19,000 people have died from coronavirus in France, and Emmanuel Macron has admitted that mistakes have been made.
Et l'épidémie n'est pas encore maîtrisée.
The epidemic is still not under control. We need to continue to make every effort to try and stem the spread of this virus, because the more we do that, the more we will be able to save lives.
Alors, étions-nous préparés à cette?
So, were we prepared for this crisis? Well, I think the answer would be no. We weren't, but we have to admit to our errors. We made difficult decisions when dealing with incomplete information, changing information about the virus.
The containment measures have dealt a heavy blow to the French economy, with restaurants and cafes out of action. Many owners do say that they won't have the finances to reopen once the pandemic is over. Meanwhile, President Macron is calling for schools to resume normal activity in mid-May, but many teachers do think that that is premature. Charlotte Dubinsky reports.
Schools could start to reopen from May the 11th. That was the announcement from President Macron, prompting a wave of criticism, not just from teachers, but doctors too.
This choice reveals an absolute lack of logic. It is very difficult in a school environment to enforce social distancing measures. And now the first environment that the president wants to reopen is the school environment. How does it no longer carry the same risks?
While the Federation of French Doctors says it's worried the target date could generate an unnecessary risk and is premature.
Children do not necessarily follow instructions. They will naturally play together and risk bringing the virus home.
That criticism seems sharper perhaps, given that almost in the same breath, Macron announced that restaurants, bars, cinemas and museums would not be reopening until further notice. That's left some teachers' groups reeling.
We're going to return with young children and adults packing the small classrooms 20 square meters maximum. The school cafeterias are crammed with 500 people inside. It's completely incoherent to leave bars and restaurants closed because of 20 people, yet at the same time open a school with some 500 to 1,500 students.
One of Macron's given reasons for reopening schools gradually was to fight against social inequality.
Trop d'enfants, notamment dans les quartiers populaires.
Too many children, notably in poorer areas in the countryside, are deprived of school without access to digital tools.
Since schools closed in March, teachers have been educating their students online. There have been public television services broadcasting lessons to the nation. Yet despite these new concerns from the government about students falling behind, the Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer recently advised that they should take a break over the Easter holidays. For one teaching union, there is a clearer motivation behind the return to school.
We have the impression that we are being sacrificed on the altar of the economy. It seems like the school is being used as a big childcare service so that mom and dad can go back to work.
That's also the belief of the teaching collective, the Red Pens.
This is an irresponsible decision driven by economic interests. Life is more important. Health is more important than the economy.
The Red Pens also say there needs to be a concrete plan to protect not just those who work in schools, but the pupils too.
What we are waiting for is a more viable situation. Mass testing, including immunity tests, masks in large quantities, and all that won't be ready in 26 days. It's impossible.
A full plan hasn't yet been formulated about how schools will reopen. Schools will, though, be disinfected and full classrooms will be out of the question. That's according to France's Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer. But for many teachers, the devil will be in the detail. Will they get face masks? How will they enforce any social distancing that's still mandated? And if, as Blanquer says, the return will not be obligatory, how can the government be sure that the most deprived students will actually come back to the classroom? Charlotte Dubinsky, RT, Paris.
More than 1,000 sailors on board a French aircraft carrier have tested positive for COVID-19. Charles de Gaulle is docked off the country's south coast, but it's not the only NATO ship to have been affected by the virus. Well, we spoke to a retired US Air Force Lieutenant Colonel who does think that France should have learned from America's recent experience of an onboard outbreak.
The group that is most sickened by this is not normally the age group of soldiers or Navy servicemen. So, you know, it's not that dangerous per se, like in terms of life and death, but in terms of operational capability, yeah, it's a bad thing, because if a third of your crew is sick and not functional, then your ship is not functional. Well, you'd like to think that social distancing and things like that could work, but those things are not going to be possible on a close quarters ship of any type. I actually am surprised that the Navy doesn't seem to have reacted and learned from that type of situation, because we had that months ago and we could see how it was handled and also what the vulnerabilities were. Very much a bureaucratic response as opposed to real leadership. It seems a little too late.
Well, despite the risks to sailors' lives, the NATO Secretary-General does believe that the real danger lies elsewhere. Jens Stoltenberg has accused adversaries, including Russia, of trying to exploit the pandemic.
Security challenges have not diminished because of COVID-19. On the contrary, potential adversaries will look to exploit the situation to further their own interests. Terrorist groups could be emboldened. We see a continued pace of Russian military activity. Our operational readiness remains undiminished. And our forces remain ready, vigilant and prepared to respond to any threat.
Now, while America's death toll spirals, the New York Times has begun blaming Russia too, saying that the Kremlin propaganda is making the pandemic worse. We'll have a look at that in detail just after the break.
Across the country have been forced to shut down, resulting in millions of Americans being laid off. Nearly 17 million lost their job back in March, and millions more are expected. And despite the help provided through the recent stimulus packages, many Americans have now been forced to turn to food banks and charity to survive. That's especially true in New York City, the epicenter of the U.S. outbreak, where Céline Bruno and Jessica Le Masurier met with New Yorkers struggling to make ends meet.
The queue for this food bank in New Rochelle stretches right up the street. This town in Westchester was one of the first places in New York to be hit hard by the coronavirus crisis. The subsequent shutdown had a devastating effect on the local economy.
What we've seen is a lot of members of our community losing their jobs. If we can alleviate and help families with this area, which is about produce and having to avoid to go to the supermarket and spend money and use that money for medical supplies or rent, we are able to help the families with at least the nutritional aspect and alleviate as much as we can the food insecurity in our community.
This New York City suburb is very diverse, both racially and socio-economically. Amongst the most vulnerable, New Rochelle's large, undocumented population. For them, this food bank is a lifeline.
No tenemos comida ni nada, entonces ayuda por la semana, salir por la semana.
Realmente la situación sí está grave. ¿Por qué? Porque nosotros, por ejemplo, yo no trabajo, me dedico a estar en casa cuidando de mis dos hijos. El más pequeño tiene asma. Mi esposo, por ejemplo, ahorita ya tiene 2 semanas sin trabajo, que es el que estamos dependiendo de él.
Claudia and Anna are not sure how they will manage to keep paying the rent, but at least for now they can practice social distancing. That's something that's impossible for New York's homeless. The Bowery Mission in Manhattan is doing all it can to help them during this difficult time. Usually there are 200 people here every day for lunch. Now there are 500. Homeless people are amongst those most at risk. Their health is often fragile and it's hard for them to wash regularly.
We're telling people hygiene is so important, to stay clean is so important, but where are people going to wash? And so that's why we've added bathrooms here outside the Bowery Mission. That's why we have a hand washing station for people prior to the meal. That's why we have this shower van here so that people can actually get a shower. We're doing it all outdoors.
As well as meal distribution, Bowery provides housing for 325 homeless people across New York. Daniel has been living in one of Bowery's overnight shelters for 3 months. He's aware of the dangers of living in a common space and tries to minimize the risks.
We do the best we can. We take precautions, we wear gloves, we clean out our areas 4 to 5, 6 times a day. If somebody is ill or has symptoms of being ill, the staff immediately takes charge of the situation. That person is sent to either a hospital or to a testing site.
Many shelters in New York City have been contaminated with the virus. In April, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that 6,000 homeless people would be relocated into empty hotel rooms to help stop the spread of the virus.
Everybody is subject to this virus. I don't care how smart, how rich, or how powerful you are. Those were the words of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo last month. But far from being the great equalizer that some expected, the coronavirus has instead exposed the devastating inequalities of American society. From getting a test to staying at home, our team in LA found that facing a pandemic is a much different experience for those with money.
People here have to wait up to 2 hours and are not allowed to get out of their car at this drive-through COVID-19 testing center. California, like a lot of the country, has a shortage of tests. As a result, only people who are 65 and older or have a pre-existing condition are allowed to get tested, which creates helplessness and frustration for a lot of Californians who don't fit into that criteria. To get around these regulations, wealthy Americans will eagerly pay the price, and no price is too high. They can call a concierge doctor, paying at least $5,000 a year for 24-hour VIP service.
We take care of a lot of different CEOs, executives, we have a lot of celebrities. We limit the number of people that we see, so we have more time and we can provide more care to the patient. And then if patients need the COVID-19 testing, we charge an additional fee.
The cost? $600, which includes 2 consultations. California has issued a stay-at-home order for all of its residents, but in reality, many don't have that luxury, like sanitation workers or these nurses who are protesting because of the lack of protective equipment they need to serve patients. At the other end of the spectrum, wealthy residents can afford luxury, and some are renting hotel rooms to replace their offices in this upscale hotel.
It's really for that person who wants to feel safe, secure, have the privacy of an office on a day that I work from home, and my wife is in the house working from home, and the dogs are barking. This could be the end of the marriage.
In Beverly Hills, the houses cost tens of millions of dollars. For people who can afford these houses, the demand for private bunkers and underground shelters has skyrocketed. A company called Vivos has bought 1,000 underground shelters in South Dakota. The American Army stored bombs at these shelters before they were converted into fully equipped bunkers, costing between 17,000 and several million euros.
Our sales are up over 400%. People are finally getting off the fence and realizing, whoa, this stuff can happen. It is happening. It's not crazy.
And for CEO Robert Vicino, this pandemic could lead to chaos.
When people come knocking on your door or banging on your door, wanting food, wanting a handout, wanting whatever you've got. And at that point is when it becomes dangerous. And I think we're 30 days from that date.
Several buyers are already using their bunkers just in case the worst happens. Whether there will be a catastrophe or it's simply precautionary measures, the richest in America do not lack options to stay safe.
That wraps up this special edition of Inside the Americas. Thank you to Fanny Allard, Mathieu Mabin, and Stéphanie Cheval who prepared the show. And thank you for watching. Do stay tuned for more news on France 24.
our goal is to follow the news around the world as it develops and keep you informed at all times.
The coronavirus pandemic is hitting us all hard, not just in France, but everywhere. We at France 24 are determined to provide you with reliable and verified information as the world confronts the biggest health crisis for a century.
Wherever we are, however best we can, we're trying our utmost to keep on bringing you the very latest news.
France 24 is on the ground, reporting from the field in English, French, Arabic and Spanish. Keep watching and reading on France24.com.
France 24. Our mission is to inform you.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Deaths in Spain drop again this Sunday, but the Spanish government remain cautious of a potential second wave. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez proposes to extend the lockdown until May 9th. 15 pro-democracy activists have been arrested in Hong Kong, with the government accusing them of organising and participating in anti-government protests, the biggest crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong since the movement began. And President Donald Trump remains under the magnifying glass as people question his response to the coronavirus outbreak, but the US president blames China for the situation. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us in the France 24 newsroom. In Spain, the downwards trend of the coronavirus outbreak continues, with deaths dropping again this week, falling to 410 from 565. Spain remains the third hardest hit country in the world, behind the United States and Italy. Infections, however, have increased, but the Spanish health authorities are confident that the current trend will continue to move down. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on Saturday announced he would ask Parliament to extend the lockdown by 2 weeks until May 9th. France 24's Sarah Morris in Madrid provides us with all the latest.
The police are out giving tough fines out and stopping cars and asking people where they're going, and people are very aware of that. The Spaniards also seem to have focused their criticism of the government more on whether it should have introduced the lockdown sooner rather than on the idea that they have had their liberty breached, as we've seen in some countries. So broadly, if you go out to the pharmacy or the supermarket, which is allowed, you'll see some pretty deserted streets in Spain. And we've seen an El País left-wing newspaper poll today coming out saying that 59% of Spaniards still think that the lockdown should remain as it is, even if that damages the economy more. And of course, we know that many Spaniards have lost their jobs because of the coronavirus crisis. Warning from the IMF, for instance, that we could see unemployment this month hit 20% as a result of the measures taken to stop people from going to their workplaces.
Here in France, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe and Health Minister Olivier Véran are due to speak later this afternoon. They will be looking ahead at the 11th of May end of lockdown deadline outlined by Emmanuel Macron, and explaining how exactly that will work going forward. COVID-19 cases here in France continue to drop, but authorities have been criticised for not planning large-scale testing. The country is facing its worst recession since World War II, with the economy threatening to contract by 8%. Italy has recorded its lowest daily increase of COVID-19 related deaths in a week, sparking hope that the country is emerging from its worst days. The number of new cases started to plateau in the first week of April, but thousands of infections continue to be reported every day. Meanwhile, the government is debating how and when to start lifting the national lockdown. Selena Sykes has more.
The cautious first steps for life after lockdown. This restaurant in the popular coastal town Fregene near Rome is preparing to get back to business with some changes. there's a quiet optimism that Italy's worst days may be over. The COVID-19 death toll rose by 482 on Saturday, the lowest daily increase in almost a week. The daily number of new cases, though still in the thousands, is also continuing to plateau. As the government begins to look at how and when to start lifting the national lockdown, its Special Commissioner for the Coronavirus Crisis is urging for caution and patience.
È sbagliato, clamorosamente sbagliato, comunicare una sorta di conflitto tra la salute e la sicurezza da un lato, la ripresa economica introdotta per coloro dall'altro. Senza la salute e senza la sicurezza, la ripresa economica sarebbe per come un battito di ciglia.
Juggling the economy and the safety of the population, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is coming under increasing pressure. After almost 6 weeks under lockdown, Italy's downward trend in deaths and cases is not as fast as was hoped. Stay-at-home orders are expected to remain in place until at least the 3rd of May.
Let's move on to the United Kingdom, where Minister for the Cabinet Office Michael Gove has said it is too early to lift lockdown restrictions. His statement comes after the government were heavily criticised by hospital staff who say they are still lacking vital health equipment. With over 15,000 COVID-19 related casualties in the UK, the government are expecting a shipment of protective equipment this Sunday. Jamil Jamin has a report.
As the death tally in the kingdom continues to mount, much-needed equipment is set to arrive on British shores on Sunday, providing healthcare workers the upper hand in the battle against COVID-19.
Today I can report that a very large consignment of PPE is due to arrive in the UK tomorrow from Turkey, which amounts to 84 tons of PPE, and will include, for example, 400,000 gowns, so very significant additional shipment.
Speaking on Saturday evening, UK Housing Minister Robert Jenrick admitted that equipment such as gowns, aprons and certain types of masks had been in short supply, adding that it is likely an extremely anxious time for people working on the front lines against the pandemic. The comments come after a leaked Public Health England document earlier this week revealed health workers are being asked to reuse protective gowns and masks as a last resort. For now, however, health officials say there are signs of breathing space and reasons to believe the worst of the virus is passing.
And I think it is now becoming clear that we are beginning to see reductions in the number of people with COVID-19 in hospitals. You can see that in London, that we have now had a succession of days where those numbers are decreasing, but also some signs in other regions such as the Midlands.
Adding to the hopeful outlook, government insisted it now had enough ventilators to manage the crisis, and that it was increasingly confident this would remain the case over the coming weeks.
Staying in the United Kingdom, the inspiring and heartwarming adventure of British Army veteran Captain Tom Moore continues with an astonishing €28 million raised for the National Health Service. The 99-year-old Second World War veteran started the fundraiser by doing laps of his garden. The initial amount he wanted to raise was a mere £1,000. Safe to say that he has by far eclipsed what he initially planned out to do. In Hong Kong, authorities have arrested 15 pro-democracy activists, charging them with organising and participating in anti-government protests last year. They are due in court next month. Saturday's arrests are the biggest crackdown on the pro-democracy movement since mass demonstrations kicked off a year ago. Catherine Viet has this.
A sweeping raid by Hong Kong police targeting pro-democracy activists.
被捕人士涉嫌喺上年分別係2019年8月18號、10月1號同埋10月20號組織同埋參與喺香港島同埋九龍區進行嘅未經批准集結。
Among those detained are several prominent lawmakers, including Democratic Party founder Martin Lee. Known as the father of Hong Kong democracy, Lee spoke out after his arrest. Also charged, millionaire publishing tycoon Jimmy Lai, who runs the Apple Daily newspaper, a publication often critical of Hong Kong and Chinese leadership. The UK and the US have denounced the arrest. In a tweet, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said arrests of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong are deeply concerning. Politicized law enforcement is inconsistent with universal values of freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. Before the coronavirus outbreak, Hong Kong was the scene of near weekly demonstrations against a proposed extradition measure with China that morphed into greater demands for more freedoms and less control from Beijing.
With protests underway in several US states against lockdown measures and the pandemic continuing its devastating toll in New York, President Donald Trump is facing increasing criticism in regard to how he handled the crisis. The US president, however, has decided to shift that blame to China. He accuses them of not being transparent about the pandemic when it first started.
The coronavirus blame game continues. Keen to pass the buck for the spread of the outbreak at home, Donald Trump has taken aim at China.
If they were knowingly responsible, certainly. If it was a mistake is a mistake. But if they were knowingly responsible, yeah, then there should be consequences.
Republicans have been keen to point the finger at China, but Trump has repeatedly wavered on the country's culpability for the pandemic. Mindful of Chinese shipments of personal protection equipment for American medical workers and a recently struck trade deal with the economic power. At first, Trump praised Beijing for its quick response before repeatedly calling the outbreak the Chinese virus, a reference he has since dropped after a phone call with President Xi Jinping. But as criticism of his administration's handling of the coronavirus crisis increases, Trump has ramped up the rhetoric.
But when the fake news gets out there and they start talking about the United States as number one, but we're not number one, China's number one.
The US government is also reportedly investigating a theory that the coronavirus escaped from a lab in Wuhan where the outbreak first began.
我们有严格的管理制度，我们有我们的科研实验准则，他没有任何，他也没有任何的，是吧？国际关系。
To his critics, Trump's pointing of the finger is a tactic to deflect scrutiny from his delayed response to the health crisis. Opponents have also accused Republicans of fanning the flames of an increased anti-Chinese sentiment in campaigns for November's election.
With almost half the world currently living under lockdown conditions, some countries are easing their restrictions. In the state of Florida, beaches have been reopened to the public despite 25,000 people testing positive for COVID-19 in the state. Catherine Kadir-Clifford has this.
A stroll on the beach. Crowds of residents took to the sand and the waves in Jacksonville, Florida this weekend. Mayor Lenny Curry reopened beaches and parks in Jacksonville on Friday after State Governor Ron DeSantis gave the green light, despite the state hitting a record number of coronavirus cases. Beaches there are now open for limited hours in the morning and afternoons, while surfing and swimming are allowed, sunbathing and group gatherings are forbidden. However, not everyone obeyed these rules or even regular social distancing rules. Many are not wearing masks, and some took part in group activities. Decisions on beach closures have been left in the hands of local governments. When the virus first hit the US, Florida Governor DeSantis was criticized for not closing beaches at the height of spring break last month, as thousands of people crowded along the shoreline.
A final word on the United States. 25 years ago, the country witnessed its worst domestic terror attack on home soil conducted by an American. The Oklahoma bombings killed 168 people in Oklahoma City. The perpetrators of the attack, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, said they did the strike in a wave of anti-government protests during the 1990s in the United States. Until the September 11 attacks in New York, the Oklahoma bombings was the worst terrorist attack on American soil. Well, that's all of the news that we have for now, but for any other information, you could go to our website, France24.com, which is, of course, available in French, English, Spanish, and Arabic. The leading story there is Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo promising public hand gel dispensers, and you can catch all the latest on the world's current events as well. From everyone here at France 24, stay safe, take care, bye-bye.
Welcome to the interview, and today I'll be joined by the International Monetary Fund's Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, to talk about Africa's efforts to deal with coronavirus. Now, there's been a massive international effort to shore up the continent's ability to respond to the coronavirus pandemic. From the IMF, the World Bank, the G20, the continent's lenders have been backing multi-billion-dollar debt relief plans that could ease the pressure on dozens of sub-Saharan African countries that are racing to keep the spread of COVID-19 cases contained. Now, the continent's moved quickly to bring in restrictions in its fight back, but with only about 18,500 cases, there are fears that numbers could spike and that the economic toll will almost certainly be devastating. The IMF reckons sub-Saharan Africa's growth could shrink by an unprecedented 1.6% this year. Well, for more on this, as I mentioned, we are joined by the IMF chief, Kristalina Georgieva. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So, going to that first point I just made there, sub-Saharan Africa is expected to deal with its worst recession since the 1970s. What does that mean in real terms for the continent?
Well, the African countries have done a lot over the last decade to boost their growth and improve their performance. And some of the African countries have outperformed the rest of the world for quite some time. And now this is a sudden stop in the world economy. That means that these gains not only can be lost, but they could be even reversed. And then, of course, we have parts of Africa that have already been hit by conflicts and natural disasters, where conditions were difficult to begin with. On top of it, many African countries have been loaded with a mountain of debt. In this environment, facing a health crisis with weak health systems, an economic crisis that is compounded by low commodity prices for those that are commodity exporters, by shrinking remittances for those that rely on remittances. This is making the situation in Africa particularly serious. And this is why in our spring meetings, we focused attention, ours and the rest of the world, on Africa.
And what exactly does that focused attention mean? What's the IMF offering in terms of helping Africa as the continent tackles the spread of coronavirus?
Well, what we have done is to look very seriously at the financial needs of Africa. And we concluded that there is a very sizable $114 billion need to support Africa. We have come up a long way. The IMF has rapidly approved emergency financing. We have over 40 countries that came to us asking urgently for support, and already we are delivering for just about 1/3 of this request. We will continue in the next weeks. A total of $18 billion that come from the IMF. On top of it, we have also gone to our shareholders and we said we need more. And here at these meetings, we requested a chance to get triple of the concessional financing on which we rely, and we got 70% of our ask. We asked for $17 billion, 70% is already in our hands, and that means we can boost further what we deliver for Africa. And the third thing we have done is we recognize that the poorest countries would have really hard time to service their debt obligations to the IMF. So with the generosity of our donors, we are providing immediate debt relief to some 29 countries, of which 23 are in Africa. And as you might have heard, together with the president of the World Bank, we called for moratorium on official bilateral debt service. And that moratorium actually got approved in record short time. The G20, together with the Paris Club, managed to unite everybody. All of this means that when we take the 114 billion, the IMF, debt relief, the World Bank group stepping up very strongly, other development organizations, we have gone a long way to meet the financial needs of Africa, but we are still $44 billion short. And that was the purpose of today's meeting, to bring us together and see how we can do more. We pledged from the IMF to do more by using more concessionality for Africa. We also call on private creditors to match what official bilateral creditors are doing, and we are very hopeful that there would be progress in that regard. Last but not least, we would like to see everybody coming in a coordinated manner so we can not only fund, but fund with high utility because we work together. And that the meeting certainly has delivered. I want to express my gratitude to President Ramaphosa, the President of South Africa, who is also a chairperson of the African Union, for being a uniting force for Africa. And I can tell you, I was very, very impressed how much Africa is coming together to face this extraordinary crisis, and how much the partners of Africa are in solidarity with Africa.
So you're saying that you feel that African organizations and African voices are actually playing enough of a role in directing these conversations about what happens with their debt at this time of crisis?
I have seen in action the African Union chairperson, the African Union Commission, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, the Economic Commission for Africa. They were present today, and they spoke not only with conviction of the need for unity, but also with very creative ideas that we will take on board and see how we can do more and how we can do better.
But in these calls,
what is so...
Sorry, Managing Director.
Yes.
Now, in all the calls for more to be done, and it looks like the IMF has really been leading the charge when it comes to shepherding efforts to try and support Africa as it deals with its financing needs with the immediacies of the coronavirus fight back. But one of the things that has been raised is the idea of debt forgiveness. Is that something that you think is feasible on the part of debts the continent's nations may owe the IMF?
What we would like to do with the World Bank is to take this period of time of debt moratorium and look at countries one by one to assess that sustainability, to understand what more can be done, and also how we can get countries themselves to take charge of their debt situation by providing more information, in other words, going in a direction of full transparency, and be more proactive in making sure that debt is well managed. When it comes down to would there be cases when there may be need for debt forgiveness, as we do these assessments, that would be a conclusion that is expected from us to draw. As I said, for the poor countries at the IMF, we have already taken a step so they are relieved from servicing their obligations to us for the period, especially the most difficult period as we go through this crisis. When it is time to look at where we are, what more needs to be done, it has to be done thoughtfully and carefully on a case-by-case basis. countries are different, debt structures are different, problems are different, solutions are different.
So what happens once the immediacy of the coronavirus fight back is over? What is required, or what can the IMF do to help the continent rebound economically from this?
Well, great question. Thank you for asking it. Yes, right now we are mobilizing to provide lifelines to countries at the time when economies are at standstill. But this is also the time to think about the recovery. And that means two things. One, what are the risks that may come on the other side? For example, if there is more spending from the budget that would lead to more burden, how would that be best handled? Do we need to look at what is the tax structure when we come on the other side? What may happen if there are bankruptcies and there is more unemployment? What can be done today to make sure that A, less of this is happening, B, we can quickly repair the damage that is being done? We also need to think of this crisis as an opportunity. Look at what is happening in the digital space. And thinking about Africa, Africa can leapfrog by the virtue of this crisis in terms of digital payments, in terms of use of e-learning, in terms of shifting gear faster towards e-governance. And as we know, e-governments are not just more efficient, they're more transparent and therefore more fair to the citizens. Will there be a chance for Africa to mobilize and move in areas like pharmaceuticals so they don't have to import everything they need for their health systems? And that is where the IMF comes into play.
Kristalina Georgieva, thank you so much for giving us your time. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for now. Thanks very much for watching. That was the interview.
Scenes not seen in airports since the dawn of the decade. Global demand for air travel down 80% and industry in free fall. With airline survival now dependent on government loans and bailouts, should a new rescue plan come with conditions such as strict targets on carbon emissions? Join us for this special edition of Down to Earth.
Down to Earth on France 24 and France24.com.
Before the current crisis, pandemics have cropped up again and again, sometimes decimating entire populations. All this week, France 24 looks back at pandemics in history. The Plague of Athens, the first ever recorded pandemic.
Une ville, une contrée
assailli par l'épidémie, perd ses critères. Une épidémie met en cause tout le genre humain.
The Black Death, which swept across Western Europe. Cholera, which ravaged Asia before invading first Russia, then Europe. Spanish flu, the scourge whose origins are still unclear today.
La grippe s'est transmise très facilement dans les tranchées et la deuxième vague a été plus mortelle que la précédente.
And finally, AIDS, the catastrophe of which the world has yet to rid itself. These diseases, inexplicable in their time, can now be analyzed by scientists and treated with medicine. Don't miss Pandemics in History on France 24 and France24.com.
French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe says the situation is improving slowly but surely here in France. However, the Prime Minister warns against complacency and says that life as we knew it will probably take a long time to get back to. Deaths in Spain drop again this Sunday, but the Spanish government remain cautious of a potential second wave. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez proposes to extend the lockdown until May 9. And in China, the state continued to use technology to tackle the coronavirus outbreak. Tracking systems have been put in place to keep tabs on the affected, a method that works, but our team in China explain it does lead to more surveillance. Hello and thank you for joining us in the France 24 newsroom. We start here in France with an 11th consecutive day of declining deaths. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said the nation is winning its war against the virus. There are now 19,718 official deaths due to the pandemic, an increase of 395 in the past 24 hours. However, health authorities confirmed that the rate of infections slowed down and that the number of people in intensive care units has again decreased. Hospital admissions have also slowed for a 5th consecutive day. Let's hear from the French Prime Minister.
Cette crise sanitaire, elle n'est pas terminée. Bien sûr, nous marquons des points contre l'épidémie. Bien sûr, et heureusement, la situation s'améliore progressivement, lentement mais sûrement. Notre vie, à partir du 11 mai, ce ne sera pas exactement la vie d'avant le confinement. Pas tout de suite. Et probablement pas avant longtemps.
Let's move on to Spain, where the downwards trend of the coronavirus outbreak continues, with deaths dropping again this week, falling to 410 from 565 on Saturday. Spain remains the 3rd hardest hit country in the world, behind the United States and Italy. Infections, however, did increase slightly, but the Spanish health authorities are confident that the downwards trend will also continue to decrease. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on Saturday announced he would ask Parliament to extend the lockdown by 2 weeks until May 9th. France 24's Sarah Morris in Madrid provides us with all the latest.
The police are out giving tough fines out and stopping cars and asking people where they're going, and people are very aware of that. The Spaniards also seem to have focused their criticism of the government more on whether it should have introduced the lockdown sooner rather than on the idea that they have had their liberty breached, as we've seen in some countries. So broadly, if you go out to the pharmacy or the supermarket, which is allowed, you'll see some pretty deserted streets in Spain. And we've seen an El País left-wing newspaper poll today coming out saying that 59% of Spaniards still think that the lockdown should remain as it is, even if that damages the economy more. And of course, we know that many Spaniards have lost their jobs because of the coronavirus crisis. Warning from the IMF, for instance, that we could see unemployment this month hit 20% as a result of the measures taken to stop people from going to their workplaces.
Let's focus on some positive news from Italy, which has recorded its lowest daily increase of COVID-19 related deaths in a week, sparking hope that the country is emerging from its worst days. The number of new cases started to plateau in the beginning of April, but thousands of infections continue to be reported every day. Meanwhile, the government is debating how and when to start lifting the national lockdown. Selina Sykes says this.
The cautious first steps for life after lockdown. This restaurant in the popular coastal town Fregene near Rome is preparing to get back to business with some changes.
Quindi da una sala ipoteticamente di 100 posti ne abbiamo ricavati all'incirca 40, distanziando, come potete vedere, tra tavolo e tavolo.
There's a quiet optimism that Italy's worst days may be over. The COVID-19 death toll rose by 482 on Saturday, the lowest daily increase in almost a week. The daily number of new cases, though still in the thousands, is also continuing to plateau. As the government begins to look at how and when to start lifting the national lockdown, its Special Commissioner for the Coronavirus Crisis is urging for caution and patience.
È sbagliato, è clamorosamente sbagliato comunicare una sorta di conflitto tra la salute e la sicurezza da un lato, la ripresa economica e il prodotto interno lordo dall'altro. Senza la salute e senza la sicurezza, la ripresa economica durerebbe per come un battito di griglia.
Juggling the economy and the safety of the population, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is coming under increasing pressure. After almost 6 weeks under lockdown, Italy's downward trend in deaths and cases is not as fast as was hoped. Stay-at-home orders are expected to remain in place until at least the 3rd of May.
In the United Kingdom, Minister for the Cabinet's Office Michael Gove has said it is too early to lift lockdown restrictions. His statement comes after the government were heavily criticised by hospital staff who say they are still lacking vital health equipment. With over 15,000 COVID-19 casualties in the UK, the government are expecting a massive shipment of personal protective equipment this Sunday. Jean-Emile Jamin has this.
As the death tally in the United Kingdom continues to mount, much-needed equipment is set to arrive on British shores on Sunday, providing healthcare workers the upper hand in the battle against COVID-19.
Today I can report that a very large consignment of PPE is due to arrive in the UK tomorrow from Turkey, which amounts to 84 tonnes of PPE and will include, for example, 400,000 gowns. So a very significant additional shipment.
Speaking on Saturday evening, UK Housing Minister Robert Jenrick admitted that equipment such as gowns, aprons and certain types of masks had been in short supply, adding that it was likely an extremely anxious time for people working on the front lines against the pandemic. The comments come after a leaked Public Health England document earlier this week revealed health workers are being asked to reuse protective gowns and masks as a last resort. For now, however, health officials say there are signs of breathing space and reasons to believe the worst of the virus is passing.
And I think it is now becoming clear that we are beginning to see reductions in the number of people with COVID-19 in hospitals. You can see that in London, that we have now had a succession of days where those numbers are decreasing, but also some signs in other regions such as the Midlands.
Adding to the hopeful outlook, government insisted it now had enough ventilators to manage the crisis and that it was increasingly confident this would remain the case over the coming weeks.
With almost half the world currently living under lockdowns, some countries are easing their restrictions. In the state of Florida, beaches have been reopened to the public despite 25,000 people testing positive for COVID-19 in the area. Catherine Kadir-Clifford has this.
A stroll on the beach. Crowds of residents took to the sand and the waves in Jacksonville, Florida this weekend. Mayor Lenny Curry reopened beaches and parks in Jacksonville on Friday after State Governor Ron DeSantis gave the green light, despite the state hitting a record number of coronavirus cases. Beaches there are now open for limited hours in the morning and afternoons, while surfing and swimming are allowed, sunbathing and group gatherings are forbidden. However, not everyone obeyed these rules or even regular social distancing rules. Many are not wearing masks, and some took part in group activities. Decisions on beach closures have been left in the hands of local governments. When the virus first hit the US, Florida Governor DeSantis was criticized for not closing beaches at the height of spring break last month, as thousands of people crowded along the shoreline.
In other news, 25 years ago, the United States witnessed its worst domestic terror attack on home soil conducted by an American. The Oklahoma bombings killed 168 people in Oklahoma City in 1995. The perpetrators of the strike, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, said they did.
There's a big problem with the flow of information. In that respect, the various accommodation operators do differ from each other. In many instances, they simply enact a ban. That's unfortunately the case in many centres, without clear information or explanations, and that leads to extreme tension and uncertainty.
We were shown this video filmed on a mobile phone. Authorities plan to relocate new refugees to an accommodation center, but rumors spread that the group included people infected with the coronavirus. Residents of the center protested, leading to scuffles with the police. One resident who wishes to remain anonymous was there. She tells us the center had already been put under quarantine before the incident.
I'm afraid for the children. Why are they bringing sick people here? They've locked us in, and on top of that, they're bringing sick people here.
Berlin authorities told us that to avoid putting an additional center under quarantine, one infected person and 3 people they'd come into contact with were relocated and isolated. The authorities insist the residents were extensively informed.
Businesses, large and small, are feeling the impact of lockdowns. Germany's world-famous breweries are no exception. In the southern state of Bavaria, one brewery that can trace its history back more than 400 years has been forced to shut off its taps for good.
Where beer crates and barrels were once moved about at breakneck speed, the pace is now feeble at the Werneck Brewery in Germany's Bavaria. No one's buying. Sure, they sell some to grocery stores and the like, but restaurants and bars are the lifeblood of a brewery like this one, and nearly all restaurants and bars are shut. It takes a lot of strength and energy, and we invested a lot in recent years to get in a good position and be ready for the future. We invested a lot personally and as a family, and then came coronavirus. After Corona's arrival, the fermenting tanks were emptied and the warehouse of beer bottles and barrels went quiet, just as at so many other German breweries. We don't know when the restaurants will be able to reopen, when the beer gardens will reopen. I'm afraid that in a worst-case scenario, it could be July or August, and we won't survive that stretch, neither the restaurants nor the breweries. Beer. Cases and cases of it will stand idle, perhaps never even tasted, as this family business gives way to the virus. The brewery has always been there. It's been a part of every dinner table conversation all our lives. We'll be missing part of our identity. And in a way, the region will be too. Werneck brewed its first batch in 1617. Its last, it appears, in 2020.
With people around the world forced into lockdown, another sizable population has also been hard hit, and that is stray animals. Cut off from restaurant leftovers and the kindness of strangers, many animals are at risk of starvation. But in Greece, help is at hand.
Just outside the Parthenon, on the empty streets of the Greek capital, Eleni Kefalopoulou is on a mission. Her stroller is full of cat food. Eleni is a volunteer for 9 Lives Greece, a frontline worker for the feline world. She has a very appreciative clientele.
Because of the quarantine, we have a heavier workload. We used to feed around 600 cats a day. But now we have to go to other areas where people have stopped feeding them because shops have closed. So we now feed more than 1,000 cats a day.
The hungrier the animals get, the more likely they are to approach people. But many are afraid of the street cats.
People have many phobias during this period, but fortunately scientists have explained that there isn't a problem of contagion from animals, and even less so from strays. So let's help them a little during these difficult times.
There are furry bellies to fill across the city. So Eleni moves on, tending to animals who face an especially tough time during the coronavirus crisis.
You're up to date on DW News. I'm Mariana Evanstein. From me and the entire team in Berlin, thanks for the company.
It's a deadly sin and a whim of nature. It motivates us and threatens to ruin us. Greed. The insatiable desire for more. It's the motor that drives our world and puts it in danger. Why are we greedy? We go in search of answers in a documentary film. Greed starts May 21st on DW.
Amazing grace.
Menzi Mngoma exults in opera, but he earns his living driving a taxi in his hometown of Durban, South Africa.
Like me.
A passenger took a video of him singing and it went viral.
Menzi is going high.
But is the hype enough to launch a real career?
I once was lost, but now I am found.
Menzi knows every street and alley in Durban. He's been driving on them for 2 years now. And when he drives, he loves to sing, often to the surprise of his passengers.
Oh, I see. They thought it's a radio or some CD or USB, something like that. Or I've just connected my phone. And then they'll be like, is that real you? And I'm like, yeah, it's me.
Since the video came out, his phone's hardly stopped ringing, with invitations to castings, inquiries from sponsors, and bookings for performances.
Can I take this call? Hello?
Hi, Menzi. How are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm good. I'm the lady that Ubered me home yesterday.
I remember.
So I don't think I got to telling you what I do. So I am head of recruitment for a call center. We have an influx of staff every month. Oh. So, I mean, if in our induction we have you there, inspirational talk kind of thing, yes. And obviously we will pay you for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just be paid for talking. For talking.
Not singing.
Not singing this time. I'll be paid just for talking. Yeah. It's just get to my emotions so much because I didn't realize it will go this far. I thought maybe it can just go to Facebook, maybe 100 or 200 viewers. One of them will just say, no, can you bring that guy to come and perform in my wedding or something like that? Just a small thing. It's overwhelming. I like it.
In fact, he had long been active in Durban's music scene, performing at concerts and taking part in competitions. But it had never been more than a hobby. Now every one of his rehearsals is live streamed. Menzi hopes to keep people talking about him. Music teacher Sabelo Makanya has known Menzi since childhood. But even before Menzi's big discovery, they met several times a month to practice. Menzi never formally studied voice.
Since he was young, I can see that he's got something special. I'm so proud of him for his achievement at the moment. I don't have even words for it. I'm so pleased for him. I'm so pleased. It's amazing. This is I've been praying for this for a long time. I see him on big opera stages. Yeah, because he does have a talent.
He's even received a call from a menswear shop, which lent him a tuxedo for his next performance.
How are you feeling?
I'm so excited, bro.
You like that outfit?
It's perfect. This is classy, bro.
Like an opera singer, a guy who's driving and he sings. I'm like, okay, this is very interesting, you know? So yeah, I was really excited to meet him, and it's even better now that I see him in person.
The next day, Menzi takes a plane from Durban to Cape Town. He's been invited to perform at the Voices of South Africa singing competition. He's optimistic.
It will be my first time losing the competition. I normally win them. I'm so excited about this trip, the whole trip just to go to Cape Town. Yeah, it's like a dream coming true.
Even so, Menzi is seen as the underdog. Many of his competitors are professionals who've studied music formally. For added motivation, the prize money is 30,000 rand, about 2,000 euros. He even gives it one last run-through in the dressing room.
I am ready. Ready.
He sings an aria from the opera Tamerlano by Georg Friedrich Händel. The audience approves.
It was beautiful. He sang very well, took control of his voice, and he sang the aria through, and each and every phrase was amazing and well planned and well executed as well.
I found Menzi's performance to be very moving. His voice was amazing.
Time for the jury's decision.
International opera singing competition winner is Lebogang Odor.
I just like the fact that the experience here.
Yes.
Yeah, he wants us to take a photo. I will come just now.
Back in Durban a few weeks later. Menzi lives in this township with his partner and 2 children. They're going to get out of the city for a while and visit his parents in the country.
My family is my life. Starting from school, it was the only Mngoma family where you'll find the whole family will come out, maybe with 2 cars, to go and support one person. Maybe let's say I'm competing on choral music school competitions. So they will come. My daddy will take off at work, and then my mom was not working. Then they will dress up. They will all come. So it was just a good thing.
Menzies' parents are both talented singers. They used to sing in a choir and often used to sing at home as well. On display in the living room are the trophies Menzies won at regional singing contests. Menzies has great ambitions. In December, he plans to fly to the United States for a casting. He shows his mother his fundraising page, by which he hopes to raise the money for the trip from people he's never personally met.
Opportunity for performer. Wish you all the best. Thumbs up. Best of luck. If I'm being scouted, there is only one goal for me: is to be an international performer. That's only my wish. I just want to be an international performer, being recognized. When I go to China, I'm being recognized. When I go to England, I'm being recognized everywhere. So that's my wish.
Menzies' father is an out-of-work truck driver, and his mother is a traditional healer. They join together to communicate with their ancestors, a Zulu tradition, and pray for Menzies' success. But the greater the pride, the higher the expectations.
I'm very excited and happy that my son may even be going abroad. But he mustn't forget his roots, or where he comes from. He's got to represent his family with pride. And he should think of us, his parents, even if all goes well for him.
But in the meantime, countless other videos have also gone viral on social media. The big hype over Menzies is dying down.
I call myself a hustler. I'm special. So, but I just don't carry that and then have that ego. But because at the end of the day, you saw I'm a father. I need to put bread on the table. So I can't say, hey, I'm special and keep motivating myself with nonsense. So I just need to wake up and work. This is South Africa. There are people with masters. There are people with doctorate, but they don't work.
The next rehearsal in Durban, together with the city's modest circle of opera singers. Hardly any of them can manage to earn a living with their music. Menzies' friends and colleagues are all rooting for him.
I must say the guy is stubborn. I must say the guy is stubborn and passionate, which is a good thing.
At the moment, says Menzies, luck is on his side, so he's got to use it while he can and hope for a turn on the big opera stage.
Africa.
Biocoal instead of firewood. In Madagascar, students are learning how to make pellets and briquettes out of plant remains. The goal? Less deforestation and more new trees for the island nation.
Eco Africa. Next on DW.
Are you ready for this?
Uh-huh. Ouch! Would you like a piece of shoulder? At Cake International, the baked goodies are more than mere tasty desserts. Culinary artists from all over the world
attend the Easter services.
Georgia's Prime Minister has said a balance must be found between staying safe and practicing faith.
I want to assure you that both the state and the church fully understand their responsibility towards human health, upholding institutions and the law, and the functioning of the church. The challenge is to find the golden balance.
Georgia has enjoyed a gentle infection curve until now, with social distancing largely observed. But Easter's celebrations have the scientists worried.
This is now the problem for us, this 4 or 5 days. If the social distancing will be less, of course the chance of the spread of the infection and increasing the rate of the new infection will be much more.
Many Georgians have chosen to stay home this Easter, pray with their families, and pray for the safety of their nation. Robin Forestier-Walker, Al Jazeera, Tbilisi.
You're watching Al Jazeera with me, Sahil Rahman. A reminder of our top news stories. Now, the British government has described reports that Prime Minister Boris Johnson skipped critical coronavirus meetings early in the outbreak as grotesque. The Sunday Times newspaper alleges that the British government was too slow to respond to the threat from the pandemic.
The Prime Minister, from the moment that it became clear that there were challenges in terms of coronavirus developing in China, has absolutely been leading our nation's effort to combat the coronavirus, making sure that resources and money is not an issue or a concern for any department, especially the health service, in terms of dealing with this. And as you will well know, and I know as an experienced journalist you're very aware of this, many COBRA meetings take place, and I've spent many hours attending COBRA meetings where it's actually led by the departmental minister. But the focus that the Prime Minister was putting on this and can just continue to put on this has meant that this is the whole government effort.
Pressure is mounting on US governors to ease coronavirus lockdown rules. Protests, encouraged by Donald Trump, have been held in several states for the third day in a row. The president says some states will begin easing restrictions as early as Monday. Turkey has replaced Iran as the Middle Eastern country with the highest number of reported infections. Close to 3,800 were diagnosed in the last 24 hours, raising the total to more than 82,000. Iran's warned that the US of a decisive response in what it calls any dangerous actions by American forces in the Gulf. It follows an incident on Wednesday when the US military says 11 vessels from Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard came close to its ships in the Gulf. The US called the moves provocative. Voters in Mali are casting their ballots in the second round of legislative elections despite threats of violence and the pandemic. The government went ahead with the vote despite the kidnapping of an opposition leader and threats from fighters linked to Al-Qaeda. Libya's UN-recognised government forces say they've resumed their military operation towards Tahuna after successfully completing stage 1. They're battling to recapture the stronghold of warlord Khalifa Haftar. Those were the headlines. I'm back with more news in half an hour here on Al Jazeera. Next, it's 101 East, Myanmar on trial. Do stay with us.
Villages burnt to the ground. Hundreds of thousands displaced. Mass murder.
There is compelling evidence of genocide and genocidal intent.
The Gambia has taken Myanmar to the International Court of Justice, accusing its government of orchestrating a campaign of destruction against the Rohingya people.
There will be no tolerance of human rights violations in the Rakhine.
But now we have evidence showing that for many Rohingya, the nightmare continues. As the world awaits a verdict, 101 East has been given access to years of secret videos. And we travel to Myanmar's Rakhine state to meet a people still facing danger, discrimination, and death. The Gambia's case is centered around a brutal military crackdown which began in late 2016 in response to attacks by an armed Rohingya group. It led to a mass exodus of Rohingya into neighboring Bangladesh in the months that followed. This video is one of many filmed by local activists determined to expose the Rohingyas' plight to the world. They are a rare glimpse inside Rakhine State, where journalist access is severely restricted. 101 East has reviewed and verified more than 3 years' worth of footage. It tells a horrific story. At a secret location outside Myanmar, we meet a former member of the activist group. For his safety, we're hiding his identity. He filmed this interview just before the mass exodus in 2017 that saw hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fleeing to Bangladesh. Nearly 3 years on, we managed to track down the woman in the video. She now lives in Bangladesh, inside the world's largest refugee camp. The scars on Karima Khatun's arm are a constant reminder of what happened to her in Myanmar. She says hundreds of soldiers attacked her home in Chutpin village on the 27th of August 2017 when she and her baby were shot. Karima's husband was also killed in the attack, along with 3 other members of their family and hundreds of her fellow villagers.
বাদলতে গরত গলি গলি ওরে বিড়াইন্দর লাতি মারি মারি নিয়ালা ফেলাই ওরে বিড়াইন্দর মুন্তি মুন্তি বেড়াইন্দর গুলি গলি গলি ওরে মারি ফেলাই গুড়া গুড়া ফাইনা কল মানে তলত চুরি বাদি ওতে মানে মারি হেঙ্গুরি তুলা নিয়ালা ফেলাই মাইয়া ফাইন্দরে স্কুলত গলাই ওরে রেপ গইছে
At the International Court of Justice in The Hague, Aung San Suu Kyi says Chutpin was one of a dozen main conflict areas in 2017.
It is of the utmost importance that the court assess the situation obtaining on the ground in Rakhine dispassionately and accurately. Regrettably, the Gambia has placed before the court.
She insists the military was merely responding to an armed Rohingya group that had targeted more than 30 police stations and an army base.
In northern Rakhine.
But she also says this.
It cannot be ruled out that disproportionate force was used by members of the defense services, in some cases in disregard of international humanitarian law. If war crimes have been committed by members of Myanmar's defense services, they will be prosecuted through our military justice system in accordance with Myanmar's constitution.
The case against Myanmar has galvanized Aung San Suu Kyi's supporters back home. One day before her testimony at the International Court of Justice, thousands gathered in Myanmar's largest city, Yangon, in support of their leader. For many here, the Gambia's case is an assault on the dignity and sovereignty of their country. They insist the Rohingya are foreigners. But Rohingya refugees now sheltering in Bangladesh insist Myanmar is their homeland. Satara Begum doesn't know if she can ever return. She lost her husband during a military operation in August 2017. They lived in Myo-tu-ji, one of the 12 areas on Suu Kyi's list. As they were fleeing, her husband decided to go back to lock their door. Satara is now struggling to look after her 5 children. The youngest is just a toddler. Mohammed Ayas and his family also fled the same area for Bangladesh in 2017. He's kept a record of what happened there. Videos filmed by residents show the extent of the destruction. Ayas says the attack was unprovoked.
মানুষ যত পয়েন্ট আছে কিছু পয়েন্ট চাইলে আর বারবিটা দুধে আছে কিছু আছে ইধর দরকার দিয়ে আর কিছু আছে গুলি মারছে আর কিছু আছে লইয়ারে আছে বয়স্ক মানুষ এইটার আছে মানে গতি নিলি না পারে ইন্দিলে আছে ঘরে খানা মা গলা এইটার কি করছে ঘরত গলায় বাজু টানা মাঝে আছে তো মন করে দিলে ইন্দিলেই আছে
Myanmar's government says it's willing to take back refugees like Ayas. But it wants them to register for a National Verification Card, or NVC, a process that will supposedly pave the way to citizenship. But many Rohingya are reluctant. The process assumes that they are foreigners, leading to fears that even if they are granted citizenship, they won't have the same rights as regular citizens. Ayas insists the Rohingya should be treated equally.
Our citizenship right, our compensate our জায়গা জমি সব সম্পত্তি আর এডুকেশন রাইট ইন আর জিন রাইট ডিমান্ড করি এখন আর কমিউনিটি কলেজ যেন ডিমান্ড করে ইয়ালে যদি অনারে এখন দর দিলে আমি বিয়ালর বাদ বাংলাদেশে মানে হাইম বর্মা যায় বলা রাজি
We're visiting Rakhine State on a rare government-supervised press tour. From Yangon, it's a half-day journey by air, land and sea. It's 5 days since the ICJ handed down a preliminary ruling, ordering the Myanmar government to take all measures to protect the Rohingya from genocide. We'll be spending the night in Mongdor, near the border with Bangladesh. Security is tight on the drive up. There are armed police everywhere. On our way, we pass Mil Tuji. There's nothing to suggest this used to be home to a large Rohingya community. A fence and new buildings have been erected. The land is now occupied by a police outpost. Our first stop is a meeting with Mongdor District Administrator Yu So-ong. We ask him for his reaction to the ICJ's preliminary ruling. We then ask him about Rohingya land that is now occupied by the government. In his reply, the district administrator uses the word Bengali to refer to the Rohingya, a controversial term that implies that they are foreigners. During most of our 3 days in northern Rakhine State, we follow a schedule set out by the Ministry of Information.
45 minutes.
45 minutes. We stay here.
Yeah.
We're there 45 minutes. Okay. 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yes.
Armed police stand guard at the villages we visit. A government cameraman films us as we go about our work. And minders record the names of everyone we talk to, making it impossible to speak freely. In Yaomar village, children at an NGO-funded centre are able to learn and play. But most Rohingya can't receive more than a high school education. Musa is 19 years old. Musa's father, Syed Ahmad, says it's because he doesn't have the right identity documents. But then, minders from the Ministry of Information take down Musa's details, and he declines to answer any more questions.